Activists and some members of the city council are trying to have a new way to monitor encounters between civilians and police. The idea is to require officers in the Boston Police Department to wear body cameras. Top officials say any steps toward that requirement should be very careful. Our guest is a supporter of the idea. He's a co-organizer of the Boston Police Camera Action Team. We'd like to welcome Segun Idowu. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, tell me why you really decided to look at this idea very, very closely and try to run with it.
When Shakia Scott, who is the other co-organizer of this organization, we are very good friends since high school, and as soon as the death of Michael Brown started gaining traction on Twitter and images of his body lying in the street, we became very upset. But it was not a new type of upset. We had already seen images like that from Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and I can go on down the list of different names and hashtags now that we witnessed. And so, very often when tragedies like this occur, we, get very frustrated, we vent, and we always pronounce that something must be done. But very often we don't know where to begin and become sidetracked by that and go back to our daily normal lives. So this time around we decided that body cameras was at least, at that time we thought it was an easy issue. So we thought it would be easy enough to start with that and then move on to other forms of police reform.
Before you get into nuts and bolts of how this plan would work, we have had instances in Boston where we're not talking about body cameras, but there was some kind of visual surveillance showing what was going on in an encounter, and in different ways it made some kind of a difference, changed the story actually. Right. What do you learn from that, what we've seen recently?
Well, the commissioner has said many times that we have many cameras focusing on us, whether it be on buildings or at stoplights or our cell phones, etc. But these instances that were caught on camera just happened to have happened. They just happened to have been caught by the camera that was in that vicinity. But we can't always rely on the camera that is on a store or on a cell phone. We can't always rely on someone to just open their phone and record what's happening. So we really believe that having this camera available will capture every incident that occurs, and we won't have to rely on a camera just happening to be around.
So what would you do in this requirement? Because this is not a 100% of the police force at all times. So what exactly do you think would be reasonable?
We in our policy say that patrol officers who have the power to arrest and detain civilians should wear the cameras. We took out undercover officers, officers who are off duty or officers who are performing details for private companies. So really those officers who are in the community dealing with the citizen on a day-to-day basis, who are not relying on their cover to catch criminals in the act of doing something, to wear these cameras.
Now I know there's some concern out here about maybe invasion of privacy, because sometimes it might be the civilian who doesn't want that camera on.
Right. So I said earlier that we thought it was an easy issue, and obviously, as we researched some more, we found that it was not easy at all. And there were a bunch of issues, not just privacy, but also, as the commissioner brought up at the hearing, constitutional issues, and also how we pay for it, where the data goes, etc. So we wound up meeting with a lot of privacy groups that are in the Boston area and in the Massachusetts area, and also with members of the ACLU on how to tackle these issues and how to create the most sensible and best policy for these cameras. And it is with their help that we produced what was before the City Council on Wednesday, which answers a lot of those privacy concerns and really protects them as best they can, as well as the privacy of the officer.
Now, I can imagine a situation, maybe somebody is stopped and there's some conversation back and forth with a police officer, and maybe the person being questioned says, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. He didn't read my Miranda rights. I should have known I had the right. I mean, it gets all tangled up, doesn't it?
I think maybe so, but at the end of the day, Massachusetts is a two-party consent state. So, we want these cameras to kind of act like dash cams, which, again, the Boston police do not have, neither does the state police. I think we're the only state that doesn't have dash cams. But we want these cameras to act in a way that as soon as they get a call to respond to a situation, these cameras go on and they're filming everything from the beginning of the situation until it's resolved. And the officer has to make the person aware that they are filming the encounter. So at any time, the citizen is allowed to say, I don't want this to be recorded anymore, and the officer would have to turn off the camera.
Besides giving us some factual information about individual cases, how do you see this affecting this whole climate of trust? And this is a racially charged climate we're talking about.
So, again, the commissioner brought up, if officers are wearing cameras, that informants may not want to give information, or that this is going to dissolve trust between the police and the community. But even making a statement like that already acknowledges that there is a lack of trust to begin with. All the studies that are out there show that these cameras reduce complaints and reduce the use of excessive force by a large margin. And in my mind, those are things that build trust between the police and the community, because a lot of the things that create the distrust is the excessive use of force. And so, and in my opinion, things like a high unsolved homicide rate are things that also create an atmosphere of distrust. If the officers and the district attorney can't put people in prison, even when people inform on them, I'm not sure that body cameras are going to decrease the amount of people who want to give information if something like that already exists as well.
Councilor Tito Jackson mentioned one instance of cameras coming into play recently. There was a man who was either photographing or videotaping a police encounter, and one of the officers came over and acted in a way that many people thought was unnecessarily abrasive, and that officer in turn got taken to task by the commissioner. Mm-hmm. What does that tell you about this new realm, this new area for transparency and disclosure?
I mean, it tells me that, situations like that have always existed. It's just that cameras are actually catching it now. So, we respect every officer in the Boston Police Department. We know that they have a tough job. We all have friends or family members who serve in the police department, but there are a few who do not serve in the best capacity that they're supposed to do. And we think that these cameras are necessary to catching those officers so that they can be disciplined in a way that keeps the trust and keeps building on the trust that exists already.
You heard recently in a hearing of the City Council, there's this back and forth, we've had enough consideration, let's go ahead with this. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, especially from the leaders of the police department, be very careful, maybe if anything, go with a pilot program or maybe wait for some more things to mm-hmm. emerge from other cities. How quickly do we have to move and on how much of a scale at this point?
Well, I can say that, even representing my community, we've heard wait and go slow for a really long time. And this policy that we produced and introduced at the City Council is the first time that any community has not only demanded body cameras, but written the policy that would go with this at the same time. I think there are enough studies out there and enough cities that are doing this that show us the positive effects of having body cameras. I'm all for a pilot program if that's what they think is the best way. I would advise that the pilot program begin on our drug and gang units, because these are the factions of the police department that many members of the community have the most problems with. I don't want us to follow the route of New York, where they have tens of thousands of officers, but they equipped only 54 officers with cameras, which I don't think yields really the best results for studies. So if we decide to go with the pilot program, I think we should focus on those units, but also really, have enough cameras that creates, one of the best studies out there as well to show that, we had 300 officers wear these cameras, and these are the results that we got from this.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Segun Idowu. We'll have more news in just a moment.